From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Consider This with Cathy Wyatt, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Keep your eyes on the gray truck and the red car. You're going to see the vehicles are stopped at a red light when the road completely collapses under them, taking those cars with it. Now, Omaha police say the driver of that truck was actually able to pull himself out. Then he and bystanders helped get the driver of the SUV out. No injuries were reported.
Hi everyone, I'm Cathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 29th season and this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, infrastructure. Joining us to talk more about it are Jiong Hu, professor for graduate programs in civil and environmental engineering at UNL, and Austin Rouser, assistant public works director and city engineer in Omaha. Thank you both so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
All right, we're going to get back into that incident later in the program, but I do want to start by asking the two of you for your initial reaction when you saw that. Dr. Hu, let's start with you.
Sure. First of all, as a driver, my first impression is, wow, that could happen. So it's I don't know whether you know that it's actually very close to where we work at. So we pass that couple times a day. So one of the most amazing things is that to see that how big a sinkhole could be. This is something that we know sinkholes sometimes happen, but this is big. Something underneath really happened. And then the next thing is who's responsible for this and what really happened. So this is something that definitely could get into more detail. So to me, this, as an educator, this is a good example to show people that, well, this something could happen. This is something could have a major impact. But to me, the bad thing is not, well, no one get injured. So this, in certain way, we kind of dodge a bullet on this. But to me, this is showing how important our work is.
Yeah, Austin, and we know that this isn't uncommon, but to capture it that way, remind our viewers how we were able to see that on video.
Sure. Cathy, thanks for having me on. I'd like to back up. My first reaction with that was I really hope that no one was hurt. Unfortunately, in this particular instance, that was definitely the case. Our number one goal as engineers is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, and so we want to make sure that no one was hurt. But that video, from my understanding, came from actually a UNO parking garage, which is fortunate that it was there, to capture the video. Obviously, video has a dramatic effect on people's emotions. When you see something happen like that visually, it's pretty striking, and obviously would have an impact, fears that people might have of bad things happening to them. To see that visually is certainly impactful on people and can affect your emotions.
Thank you. We are going to talk about that a little bit later in this program. But Dr. Hu, I want to just start big picture here. Basic definition of infrastructure.
So infrastructure can mean so many different things for different people, but to me, infrastructure are the essential system that support community, support daily life of people. So it could mean many things like transporting goods, bridge, roads, as well as other different kind of things. But to me, to make it sure that infrastructure is a backbone of a society, it's something that we rely on our daily life. But many times we don't realize that until something happened, like what we saw early on.
Okay, Austin, I understand there are two types of infrastructure. There's hard and soft. As we are putting up a scroll for our viewers, let's begin with hard infrastructure. What's important to know about that?
Sure. Hard infrastructure, as Dr. Hu had mentioned, this supports the public, it supports our society. So hard infrastructure is the physical things that are actually built to serve a purpose like that. So we have roadways, we have water distribution, we have wastewater collection, we have a number of other different things in the built environment that help society to progress and contribute to the lives of people that live there.
Okay, thank you. And what about soft infrastructure?
Yeah, soft infrastructure is a little more systematic. So again, it helps society. It develops it creates a structure and a framework for people to get the goods and services they need. Definitely things like supply chain are part of soft infrastructure, medical care, healthcare, law enforcement services. Those are different types of systems that are in place, banking that support society as a whole.
Okay, Dr. Hu, we're going to put up a map for our viewers, and as we do that, tell us how Nebraska compares maybe with the rest of the country in terms, again, broad strokes of infrastructure.
Sure. So when you look at the map, again, look at the grade, which is on the top, bottom left corner. That's C+, C, all the way to D-. So overall, you can see that the whole nation is not doing that good if you're looking at grade-wise. But overall, I think Nebraska is probably in the mix, like average, below average in certain way. But I do want to say a few things related to this is, like Nebraska is kind of unique compared to many other states. Like we don't naturally deal with a high congestion and so on. So that's part of that we don't deal with, but we also have a lot of rural area as well. So, but overall, I think Nebraska is kind of at the mix, a little bit right in the middle, but below average.
Okay. ASCE, Austin. What does that stand for?
Yes, Cathy, that's the American Society of Civil Engineers. It was formed in, I believe, the 1850s. So it's a long-term organization that was started by a group of engineers just concerned about infrastructure. The group, the association, is very much focused on advancing the profession as a whole. So there's a lot of education that goes through the membership. They have their current office is near Washington, D.C. So there's advocacy. They obviously have a lobby arm that works to support funding. The report card is obviously a part of that. We want to show our elected officials and the people who fund infrastructure where our needs are. And so that's a very important component. But overall, it's an organization that advances a lot of technical documentation. They provide support to engineers. They give us even a lot of the standards that we use to practice engineering are developed by ASCE and distributed through their membership.
So why did you get involved in this, Austin? You're talking about this, and I'm thinking there's a reason everybody lands where they are. Why is that for you?
Well, it's about serving a community. I think that just providing service to society as a whole, it's a very rewarding profession to be in. And being an engineer it also adds a very interesting component to that, where we're building things and we're trying to solve problems, right? People have problems throughout their daily lives, and so we want to use science, technology, mathematics to solve problems that help people to have better lives, to have more enriched lives, and that's really why it's a meaningful profession, in my opinion.
Dr. Hu, what about you? Why are you here?
Well, like what I'm doing is directly related to all these things we talked about. I deal with roads, deal with buildings, and this is our job in both research front and education front. So like Austin mentioned, it's kind of our responsibility to make sure that we have a safe and servable infrastructure. So in many ways, I feel that our job is to make sure that people don't think too much about this. I'm okay to hide behind the scene. If no one's really think about us in many ways, we are doing a good job.
Yeah, well, and studies are so important. I learned that about every 4 years, volunteers come together and they pull this very, very important data for us. We're going to put up another graphic for our viewers, and as we're doing that, 2025, they released more information, and these are what are described to be Nebraska facts. So, Dr. Hu, if you want to walk us through these, and then maybe when we're finished with that, we can talk a little bit more about things that are you think are important. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm not going to read through everything, but a few things you see over there. We are dealing with like 17 of roads are in poor or fair condition, 7.8% of bridge are considered structural deficiency. And so these are the things that we are dealing with. And this is something that we need to resolve. So what I see over here is the overall that we have issues we have to address. So, but basically what I want to say is a few things that is important for people to know, that a lot of our infrastructure have been built decades ago. They been served for a long time. Like human beings, they age. So over time, you're going to see these things go down. But whether we want to have an infrastructure that's perfect, yes, we want. But in reality, that a lot of infrastructure will go through this distress, deterioration, and so on. So on the other hand, I do want people to understand that some infrastructure, like particular roads, they are designed to not serve in a perfect condition. Meaning that over the time, you're going to see that the condition will go down, but we need to make sure that they don't go down to a certain level that's not workable anymore. So we actually need to do work like probably Austin deal with a lot of things like maintain the road and then repair things so that prevent big things happen like this sinkhole we see earlier.
But not cheap. I mean, this stuff costs a lot of money. I wanted to ask you, how do we get to a place where we're watching video like that, or where we're not seeing it, but we know it's happening? We realize it's a problem, but I would imagine cost is a big challenge, obviously making sure that things are funded. But Dr. Hu, when your students ask you, how did we arrive where we are, with this particular rating, what do you tell them?
Yeah, well, it's a tough thing to answer because you don't want to see things like this happen. But overall, I think, as I mentioned earlier, aging is a main issue. So no structure are designed to last forever. So over the time, all this infrastructure will go down in certain ways. Some go faster, some go slower. But I think one of the main things will be regular inspection, maintenance. All of these things cost money. But the way I look at this is if we can figure out or identify issue early, like prevent an incident like this happening, we get better chance to prevent issues. As I mentioned earlier, luckily we have no one get hurt in this incident. To me, this is important to understand that, well, one is the infrastructure because of aging, they'll go down in certain way that at a certain point that we're going to see issues. Second of all is we need to make sure that we are more proactive in things like this. So inspection, maintenance on a regular basis prevent major issues from happening. So that's what I want to tell students on this.
Okay, of everything, and you obviously know more than so many of us, what seems to be the most concerning thing when we talk infrastructure and the challenges and concerns and so forth? Where do you typically go?
So it's, well, first of all, to me the most concerning thing is we don't actually see all this. So like this sinkhole is underneath. I mean, when they open, yes, we see that, but they are like instant like this does not happen overnight. So one of the main thing to me is we don't see this right away. So that's one of the concern that, well, a lot of the cases until something bad happen, we don't see that. Second of all, what I see is, well, whether we have there is a, as I mentioned, aging issue, and we also need to have funding to kind of do a regular inspection, repair. Whether the funding or the activity can catch up with this deterioration is one of the main things. Is that are we doing enough to prevent major incidents from happening? So that to me are the two major concerns. That because one of the things is a lot of the activity like inspection, maintenance, they don't get as attention as building a new bridge, getting a new road ready. So many times people tend to forget that they are important. But this incident actually show us that how important this is.
Austin, your boots on the ground here. So as he's talking about, it's tough to see things, which is true. It's tough to know what's bubbling beneath the surface. You're in this day in and day out. As you're listening to Dr. Hu, what would you add to that if viewers at home are going, okay, yeah, we can't see it, we can't this, we can't, so how do we know?
The one thing that I keep thinking about is maintaining public infrastructure. It's a lot like owning a car. You buy it, it's brand new, you clean it every now and then, you try to keep it nice. You come up on your first oil change, you've got to keep that going. In time, you miss an oil change or two oil changes, and you start having some mechanical failures, and then you get to a point where you've paid some money in repairs, and it's can I keep paying for repairs, or is it time to buy a new car, and can I afford one? And so that life cycle and that most people can relate to with an automobile is very similar to what we deal with public infrastructure, to where we go from something that's new and built, doesn't require a lot of maintenance, but to Dr. Hu's point, yes, we do have to continue to do proactive maintenance on that over time, and we can't forget about the funding of, that oil change in your car might be analogous to going in and doing some inspections in a sewer to make sure that we don't have breaches, we don't have soil leakage, joints, and those kinds of things. And so we just want to try and make sure that we have enough programs in place to do that day-to-day maintenance and inspection to keep those things in good working order and to know where the big risks are. We have an asset management program in the city of Omaha, so we're looking at risk management. We're looking at consequence of failure on a lot of our infrastructure. And so if we have something that's high risk and has a potential for failure or a high consequence of failure, we want to make sure that we're focusing effort there and looking at ways to fund a potential replacement of that. So it's day in and day out. These are the kinds of things that we deal with all throughout Public Works.
We're a statewide program, right? So as I'm listening to the two of you, what is the difference when we talk about infrastructure, urban versus rural? I mean, what are the major differences? What are they worried about on the other side of the state, for example, versus what we're concerned about here in Omaha and Lincoln? Dr. Hu?
So apparently that we have more roads over here, and then we have much more supply like water and wastewater and so on. So I think, to me, this is not an area I'm that familiar with, but I would say that for us, things like traffic, congestion, everything, and road condition could be more of a concern. But for rural area, they could have other issues like how the farmers get their water and everything. So this is one thing about infrastructure, is that different people, different society have very different need, and they might have different demand as well. So
yeah, that common thread is the whole roads situation. That's what we all seem to be, with which we're most familiar because we're driving on them all the time. I learned in doing a little bit of digging here that yes, it's rare to see something that we saw at the beginning of the program, but these cave-ins, Austin, not so uncommon over the last, 4 or 5 years, according to Flatwater Free Press, 2,100 or so. Now, starting from the very small to the more significant, we have a map, let's put that up for the viewers, just to kind of give folks an idea. So, Austin, when you hear that number, like somebody like me telling you that, what comes to mind? What's important for our viewers to know when they're looking at this map?
Well, it's obviously it's a very large number. I think probably one of the first things I would want to address is to say that, with regards to the video at the first, that's a very rare thing. Okay. Even though we're seeing a map that shows a commonality among these cave-ins or depressions that we have in the city, most of them are very minor. It's not really something to worry about. It's usually a small problem. But in the urban built environment, it's very congested, and I think that's one of the key differences between urban and rural, is that we have a utility network within our right-of-way, and so overall right-of-way management is something we think about. It's not just the street, but underneath it we have water line, we have a gas line, we have a sewer line, we have countless telecommunications lines with fiber optics, and that's just ever increasing. And you get in parts of town where there's also steam lines. So there's a whole bunch of congestion in a very tight space, and they all kind of interact off of each other. So, if you have a problem with one piece of utility or infrastructure that's underground, it can start to domino into problems with other pieces of infrastructure as well. So we just have to make sure that we manage that right away as best we can. Obviously, there's different entities. It's not just the city. There's, in Omaha, we have a water and gas company that's separate from the city. We've got a number of these private fiber optic cables in the street. We maintain the sewer and the storm sewer system within the city of Omaha, but there's a number of different entities and other things that are in our right of way, and they all have to get along with each other, in a good environment.
Okay, I want to go back to the photos. We showed a video at the beginning, but let's go back to that first photo of this incident on Pacific Street. Now, Austin, you had shared that you were one of the first folks there. Point out to us where you are here. Yeah,
the long the traffic signal head with the 4 heads in it. I'm actually behind that, so you can see my legs there. But this was obviously shortly after the incident. I think this was probably about a half hour after the actual collapse. I received a text message with a photo right after it happened, and so obviously the police were on scene. The fire department was there. Again, very fortunate there were no injuries, very fortunate those vehicles were stopped. We've seen incidents like this where the vehicle's moving and you tend to see some injuries and some greater damage with that. So really, under the circumstances, this was a pretty fortunate situation. But I obviously was there just looking inside the hole. What I saw was a gas line, a water line, a large electric duct bank, a whole bunch of fiber optic lines. So there was a lot going on inside of that hole underneath the surface there as well.
What caused this thing?
So we have a theory. We don't have a definitive answer on it, and obviously there's some disagreement among different entities about what happened. Based on the information that I've seen, and we have a lot of evidence that I think supports it, I think there's a water main under the street that I believe that sometime in the last half of 2025 had developed a leak, and that leak, you get some water that starts to saturate soils around it. The water starts to move through the soils. And then adjacent to where that water main was leaking, there is a large diameter, about a 10-foot diameter storm sewer that runs across that intersection of 67th and Pacific. Storm sewers, they're never 100% watertight. We deal with infiltration and inflow all the time on sewers and storm sewers. And so when the water saturates the soil, it eventually it'll find an outlet, right? So when it finds a gap in a joint of a storm sewer pipe, it starts to enter that. The pipe will carry the water away. Eventually that starts to erode soils. It creates a pathway. And so I think that this just was a process over several months to where, it's one of those gradual then sudden type failures where we lost some soil. We actually had some settlement occur at this location in November of 25. So we had an initial indication. We did an investigation on it. We didn't find any evidence of large-scale problems. We checked out the sewer line at that time. It checked out okay, in fair condition, didn't show any major problems. So we did a street repair at that time. Again, I think there was some continual erosion and to a point to where a void started to develop underground as water from a leaking water main washed the soil into a storm sewer pipe. Again, that's kind of an unusual situation because a lot of times in the case of a water main break or water leakage, we'll get water up to the surface. In this case, we don't believe that happened because we think it found its way into the storm sewer. And then earlier in the day before this particular incident, there were a number of witnesses who were on the trail by the creek to the west, about 1,800 feet, who witnessed a plume of mud and water coming out of the outlet to that pipe. And so, you talk about gradual then sudden, you've got several months where this is kind of building up, and then all of a sudden we have a larger hole that's washing water out of the void. This void is growing under the pavement. Eventually it gets to the point where there's nothing left to support the pavement over the top of it, and it collapses.
And you have since repaired Pacific Street. I know that we have to have folks out there who are wondering, are there warning signs? So, many of us travel the same streets every day. Is there anything that would serve as kind of a red flag where, and if there is, what do we do? Austin, do we call you or how do we respond to that?
Certainly, Public Works in the city of Omaha, we always want to hear anything, it's the see something, say something kind of thing. If anything seems to be out of the ordinary, we're always happy to check it out and do an evaluation of what's going on. And usually, again, one of the reasons why these types of large failures don't typically happen is we do tend to see warning signs usually where, again, we'll see some water at the street or we'll see some slight settlement happening and we can check it out. We had another incident similar to this in an alley downtown at 16th and Farnham. That was, in that particular case, we did know about that. We had enough early warning signs that we could actually close that off and barricade it. And then we had an unfortunate incident where someone moved those barricades and a large vehicle went in and it collapsed under it. So that's a case where we had discovered something. We've seen some of these in some other roadways where we did discover them early because we saw some of that evidence, some of that settlement. We sent our crews out to check and we were able to find things. We're looking at the settlement that happened in November to see if there's anything else we could have done to try and Obviously in hindsight, it's clear now that that was evidence of a larger problem going on underground. We didn't have the means to find it at that time, and so we're looking at different ways that we can do those investigations and make sure that something like this doesn't happen again.
Okay, thank you. We have about 2 minutes left. I'd like to give you each a minute. We're talking about infrastructure today with Austin Rouser and Dr. Hu. What is important? What do you think is most important in a minute each for our viewers to know about this particular topic? Austin?
I think the most important thing is really, for us, it's about, we haven't talked much about funding, but funding is a big deal, and we get funding through a number of different avenues. We receive funds from gas tax, from the City of Omaha's wheel tax, from different sources. We get federal grants for projects, large capital projects. That's all very important, but it's also equally as important that we maintain that infrastructure as best as we can, and that's not something where we typically can add a lot of funding to. We can't get grants for that, and so we just have to manage that the best that we can, and those are the important parts, is to make sure the asset is properly managed throughout its entire lifespan.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hu, about a minute for you. What do you think?
So, I kind of want to concur what Austin just said. I think, to me, funding is probably likely the most important thing, because as I mentioned earlier, that infrastructure not just require the upfront money to build, that also require money for maintenance, inspection, and so on. A lot of time that people don't pay enough attention on this. I think this instant we see that actually just tell us that there are additional things we might need to pay attention to. For example, how do we do regular inspection and maintain and prevent things like this from happening? So I think overall, I'm glad that you have this program so that the public can see that this is something could happen. It show people that how important our job as City of Omaha, as University of Nebraska-Lincoln, so what we can do to prevent this from happening.
Okay, thank you. Talking again about infrastructure. Folks wanting more information, we're going to put up a graphic now for you. You can reach out, unl.edu. That number is 402-472-2371. And then, of course, we have the cityofomaha.org, 402-444-5226. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your time and expertise, for everything you're doing to help keep our community safe, and for teaching those up and coming what's important for them to know about what we're talking about today. Thank you both very, very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks to our students who are working so hard behind the scenes, and of course, to all of you for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television in the School of Communication. More information and program archives can be found at nebraskapublicmedia.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call the UNO School of Communication at 402-554-2600 during regular business hours. Or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.